If you look at the news today, on July 6, 2025, it might feel like the world is spinning out of control. From the ongoing war in Ukraine to the simmering tensions in East Asia and the devastating conflicts in Sudan and the Middle East, it seems instability is everywhere. It's easy to feel overwhelmed, to wonder why so many fires are burning at once. The truth is, we're living through a profound moment of change. The old rules that governed the world for decades are being rewritten, and the power structures that once seemed permanent are cracking. This isn't just a series of isolated crises, it's a symptom of a much larger global transformation, a messy and often painful transition into a new era of international relations. The relative peace and stability that some parts of the world enjoyed after the Cold War were built on a specific foundation, a unipolar world. This meant that one country, the United States, was so powerful militarily, economically, and culturally that it could act as a global referee, setting the rules and when it chose, enforcing them. This system wasn't perfect, and it was certainly not universally liked, but it did provide a certain level of predictability. Nations knew where they stood, and the consequences for stepping too far out of line were generally clear. Today, that foundation is eroding, not because of one single event, but because of a slow, steady shift in global power. This shift is creating a power vacuum. As the primary global authority weakens, other countries and groups are stepping up to assert their own influence and pursue their own goals. It's kind of like a classroom where the teacher has stepped out. Suddenly, different groups of students start trying to make their own rules for the room. This creates competition, rivalry, and unfortunately, conflict. Nations that felt constrained before now feel emboldened to act on long-held ambitions or grievances. This is the core reason for the widespread sense of disorder. The world is moving from a system with one dominant power to a system with many competing power centers, and the transition is proving to be a turbulent one. Understanding this fundamental change is the key to making sense of the headlines. It helps us see that the conflicts we witness are not random acts of chaos. They are interconnected parts of a larger story about power, ambition, and the creation of a new global order. There isn't a single bad guy causing all the trouble. Instead, we see many different actors, countries, alliances, and even corporations, all maneuvering for a better position in a world that is still taking shape. This video will explore these shifts, looking at who the key players are, what they want, and how their struggles are defining our current age of global uncertainty. For over 3 decades after the fall of the Soviet Union, the world operated under what historians call a unipolar moment. The United States stood alone as the world's sole superpower. Its military was unmatched, the US dollar was the engine of the global economy, and American culture spread to every corner of the planet. This wasn't just about being the strongest, it was about having the ability to shape the global agenda, lead international institutions like the World Bank and the IMF, and build alliances that projected its power worldwide. This era created a sense of order, but it was an order defined primarily by American interests and values, which not everyone agreed with. However, no empire or unipolar moment lasts forever. The immense cost of being the world's policeman, including long and expensive wars in the Middle East, began to take its toll on the United States. At the same time, other countries were quietly growing stronger. China, in particular, experienced an unprecedented economic boom, lifting hundreds of millions out of poverty and transforming itself into a manufacturing and technological powerhouse. Russia, after the turmoil of the 1990s, began to reassert its influence in its neighborhood, using its vast energy resources as a powerful tool. India, with its vibrant democracy, growing technology, services, manufacturing, and defense influence has started playing a key role as a representative of Global South. This gradual rise of new powers has fundamentally altered the global balance. The result is that the US is no longer the only major player on the world stage. We're now in a multipolar world where power is more distributed. Countries like China, Russia, India, Turkey, and Brazil are increasingly acting as independent poles of influence, making their own decisions and forming their own alliances. Groups like BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are actively creating alternative financial systems to challenge the dominance of the US dollar. This doesn't mean the United States is no longer powerful. It remains a formidable force, but it now has to negotiate and compete in ways it didn't have to 30 years ago. This transition from a unipolar to a multipolar system is a primary driver of global instability. When there is no single, dominant power to enforce rules, regional conflicts can escalate more easily. Smaller countries, backed by competing great powers, are more willing to take risks, leading to proxy wars where major nations fight each other indirectly. We see this happening in places like Syria, where the recent collapse of the Assad regime was influenced by Russia being distracted in Ukraine, and Iran being weakened by Israel. The absence of a global referee has made the world a more complicated and dangerous place, as nations jostle for position in this new unfolding order. Beneath the grand strategies of nations and the headlines about military conflict, lies a more fundamental struggle: the competition for resources. In our modern world, a country's power and prosperity depend on its access to a steady supply of energy, minerals, food, and water. These are not just commodities, they're the essential ingredients of national security and economic stability. As the global population grows and more countries develop, the demand for these finite resources intensifies. This intensifying competition is a major, often hidden cause of tension and conflict around the world, turning diplomatic rivalries into tangible confrontations over tangible assets. Energy is perhaps the most critical resource in this global game. The world still runs on oil and gas, with global demand exceeding 100 million barrels per day, much of it driven by Asia's booming economies. This makes control over energy supplies and the routes they travel a top priority for major powers. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, for instance, wasn't just about territory, it was also about controlling energy pipelines to Europe and securing its position as a dominant energy supplier. In response, the US and its allies used sanctions to disrupt Russia's energy trade, forcing Moscow to find new customers in China and India, and creating a global reshuffling of energy flows. The competition extends beyond fossil fuels to the materials that power our technological future. Rare earth minerals are essential for everything from smartphones and electric vehicles to advanced military hardware like fighter jets and missile guidance systems. China currently dominates the mining and processing of these minerals, giving it a powerful point of leverage over the rest of the world. The United States and its allies are now scrambling to secure their own supply chains, investing in mining projects in Africa, Australia, and the Americas. This race for critical minerals is creating new geopolitical hotspots and economic rivalries. This struggle is not limited to minerals and oil. Access to food and water is becoming an increasingly potent source of conflict, especially in regions affected by climate change. In places like Sudan, where a brutal civil war has caused widespread famine, control over fertile land is a key driver of the fighting. Tensions are also rising over shared water resources, such as the Nile River in Africa, or the Mekong River in Asia, where dams built by one country can threaten the water supply of its neighbors. This competition for the very basics of survival adds a desperate and dangerous edge to international relations, proving that many of today's conflicts are, at their root, a fight for survival. When we think of war, we often picture soldiers, tanks, and fighter jets. While traditional military power is still crucial, the nature of conflict has expanded into new, often invisible domains. In the 21st century, a country can inflict serious damage on its rival without firing a single shot. This new form of struggle is often called hybrid warfare, and it combines conventional military threats with cyber attacks, economic pressure, and information campaigns. These modern battlefields exist online, in financial markets, and in the minds of the public, and they're just as important as any physical front line in today's global power struggles. The cyber domain has become a primary arena for state-on-state conflict. Government-backed hackers can target a nation's critical infrastructure, such as its power grid, banking systems, or transportation networks. Imagine the chaos caused by shutting down a major city's electricity or freezing its financial markets. These actions can cripple a country's ability to function. As recently as last month, in June 2025, the New York Department of Financial Services issued a warning about the increased risk of such attacks, urging banks to be vigilant against ransomware and phishing schemes designed to destabilize the financial sector. This shows that cyber warfare is not a future threat. It's happening right now. Economic warfare is another powerful tool. Instead of sending armies, countries can use sanctions to cut off a rival's access to the global financial system. The United States, because of the dominance of the US dollar, has been particularly effective at this. By imposing sanctions, it can prevent countries like Russia or Iran from trading internationally, crippling their economies. In response, nations like China and Russia are actively trying to create alternative payment systems to de-dollarize their trade and reduce their vulnerability to American sanctions. This struggle over financial control is a quiet but intense battle for global economic power. Finally, there's the battle for information. In an age of social media and 24-hour news, controlling the narrative is a strategic objective. Countries use state-sponsored media and online troll farms to spread propaganda, sow division within rival nations, and shape public opinion both at home and abroad. This information warfare aims to undermine an opponent's social cohesion and political stability from the inside out. By flooding the information space with misinformation, it becomes difficult for citizens to know what is true, eroding trust in institutions and creating chaos. This psychological dimension of conflict is a subtle but deeply effective part of the modern geopolitical toolkit. As the world changes, so does America's strategy. The era of the United States acting as the world's sole policeman, intervening in conflicts far and wide, is largely over. The new American grand strategy is more focused and defensive, aimed at preserving its leading position in a more competitive world. This strategy has several key pillars, containing its main rivals, China and Russia, maintaining control over crucial global economic lifelines, and strengthening its network of alliances. It's a shift from actively shaping the entire world to strategically protecting its core interests and influence against rising challengers. The primary focus of this containment strategy is on China and Russia. To counter China's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific region, the United States is strengthening its alliances with countries like Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, and Australia through pacts like AUKUS and the Quad. The goal is to create a network of partners that can collectively balance China's military and economic power, particularly to deter any potential move against Taiwan. In Europe, the strategy is similar. By providing massive support to Ukraine, the United States aims to weaken Russia's military and prevent it from threatening other European nations, effectively containing Russian ambitions on its western flank. Alongside military containment, the United States is fighting to protect its economic dominance, especially the central role of the US dollar. For decades, oil and other key commodities have been priced and traded in dollars, giving the United States immense economic leverage. The rise of blocs like BRICS, which are exploring trade in their own currencies, is seen as a direct threat to this petrodollar system. Therefore, a key part of U.S. strategy is to ensure that major energy markets, particularly in the Middle East, continue to rely on the dollar. The U.S. Navy's continued presence guarding major sea lanes like the Red Sea and the South China Sea is not just about security, it's about protecting the arteries of the dollar-based global economy. This strategy is not just dictated by presidents who come and go, it's also heavily influenced by what some call the deep state, or the permanent institutions of American power such as the Pentagon, the intelligence agencies like the CIA, and the vast military-industrial complex. These institutions have long-term interests in maintaining America's global reach, ensuring access to resources, and preventing any single rival from becoming powerful enough to challenge the US-led order. This underlying institutional agenda provides a steady, long-term direction to US foreign policy, ensuring that the core goals of containment and economic primacy remain consistent across different administrations. While the United States works to maintain the existing world order, rising powers like China and Russia are actively working to change it. They're not just trying to cause chaos, in fact, they have clear visions for a new system where their influence is greater and American dominance is reduced. Their goals are, honestly, pretty ambitious. They want to reshape global trade, security, and politics to better suit their own national interests. Understanding what China and Russia want is essential to understanding the dynamics of the 21st century, since their actions directly challenge the world order that's been in place for generations. China's ambition is to transition the world from a US-led system to a multipolar one, with Beijing as one of the key poles. Its primary strategy for achieving this is economic. Through its massive Belt and Road Initiative, China has been funding and building infrastructure, like ports, railways, and power plants, across Asia, Africa, and Europe, creating a network of economic dependency that, well, really enhances its global influence. At the same time, China is pushing to de-dollarize international trade and establish its currency, the yuan, as a global alternative. Its ultimate goal is to become the world's leading technological and economic power by the middle of this century, effectively displacing the United States. Russia's goals are more focused on security and restoring its historical sphere of influence. President Vladimir Putin sees the expansion of NATO into Eastern Europe as a direct threat to Russia's security. The war in Ukraine is the most dramatic expression of this worldview, an attempt to halt NATO's eastward march and re-establish Russian control over what it considers its near abroad. Beyond its immediate neighborhood, Russia seeks to undermine Western unity and power wherever it can. It does this by using its energy exports as a political weapon, forming alliances with other anti-Western powers like Iran and North Korea, and using information warfare to destabilize democratic societies. Although China and Russia have different long-term visions, they are united in their desire to challenge the current US-led system. They've formed a strategic partnership, often described as a no-limits friendship, to coordinate their efforts. This includes conducting joint military exercises, aligning their votes at the United Nations, and working together to build financial systems that are immune to Western sanctions. This alignment of the world's most powerful autocracies presents a formidable challenge to the democratic world. Their cooperation, seen in Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine with support from North Korea, and China's increasing pressure on Taiwan, is reshaping the geopolitical landscape into a clear contest between two competing worldviews. The global power struggle isn't just a story about the United States, China, and Russia. Regional powers and non-state actors like major corporations also play a huge role in shaping events. These players have their own specific goals and interests, which can either align with or complicate the strategies of the great powers. Their actions can create new flashpoints, destabilize entire regions, and influence the global balance of power. Understanding their agendas is crucial because in today's interconnected world, a regional conflict or a corporate decision can have worldwide consequences. Israel, for example, is a major regional power in the Middle East with a clear and consistent strategic goal, ensuring its security and maintaining its military superiority in a pretty hostile neighborhood. Its primary focus has been on neutralizing threats from Iran and its network of proxies, known as the Axis of Resistance. Recent events, including the devastating war in Gaza that began in late 2023 and the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria, have significantly weakened this axis. With its main rivals diminished, Israel is now in a stronger position. Its current agenda involves solidifying its military control over Gaza, potentially annexing parts of the West Bank, and continuing to seek normalization deals with Arab countries, all with strong backing from the United States. On another front, multinational corporations wield a different kind of power, one that is economic rather than military. Big tech companies, energy giants, and financial institutions operate on a global scale, and honestly, their decisions can have a bigger impact than those of many governments. For example, an energy company's choice of where to invest in a new pipeline can redraw regional alliances, while a tech company's control over data and communication platforms gives it enormous influence over information and society. These corporations are primarily driven by profit, but their interests often align them with certain national governments, making them key players in the global competition for resources and technological dominance. The complex interplay between these various actors shows just how layered and multifaceted modern conflicts are. In Sudan, for example, the civil war is not just an internal affair, it's a regional proxy war where different outside powers like the UAE and Egypt back opposing sides to secure their own interests, which include access to ports on the Red Sea and agricultural land. This dynamic, where local conflicts are fueled by regional and global rivalries, is becoming increasingly common. It highlights that, to understand today's world, we have to look beyond the great powers and see the intricate web of interests connecting regional players, corporations, and global superpowers in a complex dance of competition and cooperation. In times of great change and uncertainty, it's human nature to look for simple explanations, to search for a single cause or a single bad guy to blame for all the world's problems. But the reality of our current global situation is far more complex. There's no one simple reason for the conflicts we see today, nor is there a single villain pulling all the strings behind the scenes. Instead, we're witnessing the result of many different actors, nations, alliances, and corporations, all pursuing their own legitimate and often conflicting interests on a global stage where the old rules just don't apply anymore. Think of it not as a movie with a clear hero and villain, but as a complex ecosystem where every organism is competing for resources and survival. The United States wants to maintain its leadership position and protect the economic system that benefits it. China wants to reclaim what it sees as its historical place as a leading world power and build a system that reflects its own values and interests. Russia wants to secure its borders and restore the influence it lost after the Cold War. Israel wants to guarantee its security in a volatile region. None of these goals are inherently evil from the perspective of the country pursuing them. They're really just expressions of national interest. The problem is that these interests often clash. America's goal of maintaining the status quo directly conflicts with China's and Russia's goal of changing it. Israel's pursuit of security can lead to actions that destabilize its neighbors and cause immense human suffering, as we've seen in Gaza. The corporate drive for profit can lead to the exploitation of resources in developing nations, fueling local grievances and conflict. It's this collision of competing ambitions, not some grand conspiracy, that's generating so much friction and instability around the world. Each player is making moves based on their own logic and priorities. This perspective is crucial because it moves us away from a simplistic good versus evil narrative and towards a more realistic and honestly more useful understanding of the world. It forces us to recognize that different countries have different histories, cultures, and strategic concerns that shape their actions. This doesn't mean we shouldn't judge their actions or hold them accountable, especially when they violate international law or human rights. But it does mean that finding solutions requires understanding the root causes of their behavior. Lasting peace won't come from defeating a single enemy, but from finding ways to manage these competing interests and build a new global system where conflict isn't the inevitable outcome. The world today finds itself in the midst of a great transition, moving away from the US-dominated order that defined the late 20th century, and into a more uncertain and competitive multipolar era. The widespread conflicts and tensions we're witnessing are not signs of a world descending into random chaos, but rather the predictable and honestly painful symptoms of this profound power shift. The old framework is breaking down, and a new one hasn't yet been built to take its place. We're living in that messy space in between where nations and groups are testing boundaries, forging new alliances, and fighting for their place in the world to come. This transition is driven by a complex interplay of forces. The rise of new powers like China and a resurgent Russia is challenging the established hierarchy. A fierce global competition for essential resources, from oil and rare earth minerals to food and water, is creating new friction points. At the same time, the very nature of conflict is changing, with cyber attacks, economic sanctions, and information warfare becoming as significant as traditional military force. In this environment, every major player from the United States and China to regional powers like Israel and influential corporations is maneuvering to protect and advance its own interests. It's really vital to understand that there's no single, simple cause for this global unrest. The world isn't a chessboard with only two players, nor is there a single villain orchestrating events. Instead, it's a complex, multi-layered system of competing agendas. The United States seeks to preserve its influence, China seeks to build a new order, Russia seeks to restore its power, and other actors pursue their own security and prosperity. These goals aren't necessarily compatible, and their collision is what defines the turbulence of our times. The challenge for citizens and leaders alike is to navigate this reality without resorting to overly simplistic or dramatic narratives. The path forward isn't going to be easy. This period of struggle and realignment is probably going to continue as the new world order takes shape. It's a reminder that history isn't over. It's a dynamic and ongoing process. Understanding the deep structural forces at play, the shift to multipolarity, the competition for resources, and the complex web of national interests, is the first step toward finding a way through this challenging era. The key to a more stable future lies not in trying to restore the past, but in wisely and carefully building a new international system that can accommodate a world with many powers and many competing voices.